It's called serving Kant, darling. You know what? That might be the intro. That was funny. Okay, first of all, I'm gonna preface by saying philosophy is fucking complicated. Okay? If you want a college level discussion on this, I'm not your girl. But if you want to listen to my post rewatch of Digital Circus Rambles, where the majority of my philosophical knowledge comes from the show The Good Place, you've come to the right place.
Pomni!
Come on in.
The Amazing Digital Circus is basically a show where a handful of humans are transported to a painfully colorful digital world where they can't escape and no one knows why exactly. There's a lot more to it than that, but the main point is it's basically a case study in how different people deal with existentialism and the fact that both life and death are out of our control. But they're in funny cartoon bodies, so it's funny. So honestly, I wrote this because I have recently dove into the Digital Circus fandom kind of thing. I've gotten all the memes about it. I've rewatched it. It's really interesting. I'm not super deep into it, but the thing that has fascinated me is the way that I love a good wacky world that is rooted in basically being a character study of what happens if you put people in these extreme situations. And obviously the Digital Circus is not necessarily known for its realism, but I think that one of the reasons why it has become so successful is because it has characters that people have latched onto that are interesting. You know what I mean? And I feel like the Digital Circus is a great place to basically put somebody in an isolated environment and see what happens. It's basically like a psychological experiment. Is that a theory? Okay, I'm not touching that one. I'm going back to my corner of philosophy that I barely even know about. We're not touching that. Anyway, first things first. Jax is a nihilist. Are we surprised? I feel like this is the most obvious one. Jax is the extreme version of a nihilist. Obviously, nothing matters, nothing is real, and therefore, do whatever the fuck you want. Which, in his case, is typically be a rude asshole to everyone and take a shot at Ragatha whenever he gets a chance. Sometimes literally. But as more and more of the story progresses, we get to also see how, yeah, everything in this world is digital and they're following the laws of made up cartoon physics, but these are still people with psyches we can understand in a more grounded sense, kind of like I was saying before. This is what I get for not following the script. I wanted to add some real humanity. I wanted to add some humanity. Can you tell I already recorded a video today? Don't worry about it. Jax is using nihilism to cope with all the things he can't control, including the fact that everyone in the circus could abstract and become an unfathomable monster only to be locked into the metaphorical basement of the digital world at some point, including him. That's something else I'm not going to touch, but I do want to say. Rewatching the first episode, there's abstracted people down there. There's just abstracted people down there. Like, they don't die. They're just there. Huh? I also specifically tried to avoid watching like video essay stuff about the Digital Circus because I wanted to come up with my own thoughts. So if people have been talking about this and I missed it, please forgive me. Anywho, Jax is using nihilism to cope with all the things he can't control. And rather than let any sort of critical thinking and self-reflection about this occur, Jax jokes and pushes people away with a self-imposed wall of performative apathy.
Yeah, constantly tormenting Gangle's really funny, Jax.
You guys all take this place way too seriously.
Can you take anything seriously?
Dude, you're a cartoon clown. How am I supposed to take you seriously?
Look, Jax is one of the most obviously morally gray characters in the show, plus he's a rude, flamboyant, male-coded character with an attractive voice, and there's a million and one videos breaking down his psychology and people forcing their way behind his bad boy curtain, so nothing I say will probably be anything new, right? Whoa, you're telling me the guy who insists nothing matters and cracks jokes is doing so because he's damaged from caring too much in the past? Oh, poor thing. I hope he survives when the book talk girlies get to him. Or maybe not. Maybe he deserves that. It is in large part due to the fact that Jax is the character that is so obviously trying to hide behind his apathetic behavior, and in doing so exposes himself and his fears to the audience so clearly that I kind of came up with this concept in the first place, so thanks, I guess. His wall of apathy acts as a magnifying glass to pinpoint exactly what he's hiding from, his feelings of loss and helplessness. This is basically a long-winded explanation for why his section is so long, and in doing so, I'm kind of bloating it more, but here we are. Anyway, Jax is obviously a more human character than he insists to everybody else. But, big disclaimer, that doesn't mean I'm going to justify his actions, okay? Understanding motivation for an action is not the same thing as ignoring its impact. Jax has consistently been a horrible person to the others, a lot of times traumatizing them further than the situation already would have. This is just my disclaimer. Understanding why somebody is an abusive asshole doesn't mean that they get to not have consequences for being an abusive asshole, you know what I mean? I just wanted to leave at least a little room for nuance in terms of all of that. Because, yeah, he is a complex character, but I would argue that he's the least emotionally mature character of anybody in the circus. Maybe. While nihilism itself can be a complex and layered philosophy, Jax takes it to such an extreme in an obvious attempt to cope, he reduces it down to something that he can just hide behind. Honestly, Jax's insistence that nothing matters reads less like an accurate representation of nihilism, and more as that annoying guy who deconstructed from religion after discovering Reddit, and anytime anyone says anything insinuating that they have a belief in something, they bring it out, regurgitating one-liners they saw a comedian say as a gotcha moment, when in reality, they're just trying to start an argument so that they can feel validated. That does come from personal experience. I'll choose to leave this in if I want to. A lot of this is edging on personal shit for me. I'm gonna try to skirt around it, but I'm a professional. I'm talking into a teacup with conviction. That means you deserve to listen to me. Why? I need to stop filming 2 videos in a row. Maybe I need to continue doing it. Maybe the second video is more unhinged, and that's good. But like, okay, that description of the Redditor, going back to that, doesn't that sound a little bit familiar? Hey, oh fuck. Is Jax Rich Sanchez coded? I don't like that, but it's true. Damn it. Even down to like the random fourth wall breaks where he's basically just guessing where a camera would be and looks insane in the actual world itself because obviously in their reality they're not in a TV show.
What do you, the viewers, think it is?
Will you stop doing that?
Damn. If Jax says wubba lubba dub dub, I'm gonna explode. Girl, I have a script. What am I doing? But like, well, hold on, one last point. Even the like I'm above all this act because they don't want to feel close to anybody because they've suffered loss in their past. Shit. I guess that's the new modern cartoon trope. Get out of the way, incompetent father and wine mom. Alcoholic uncle who buried his heart in the backyard so he didn't have to feel it is here to stay as a new sitcom trope, I fucking guess. Anyway, nihilism. Right. By the way, I don't know if I actually said the definition of nihilism. Nihilism is a very vague philosophy. Nihilism is basically just the belief that nothing is real and nothing matters, right? And there's different subsections of nihilism. I actually find myself falling into the optimistic nihilism a lot. And actually, that's kind of the point of my video that I just recorded about simulation theory and how even if we are in a simulation, what does it fucking matter? Teehee. I'm not Jax coded. I did just question that for just a second. I hope you know. No. I don't want to know which character I'm most like. I'll have that bestowed upon me. That is not something I can declare. Okay. Nihilism. Right. Jesus fucking Christ. Nihilism can be one of the most juvenile takes on philosophy, at least the way that we see Jax use it to justify his immature and selfish ways. Watching how Jax interacts with the other circus members actually reminds me of another character, besides Rick Sanchez, Simone from The Good Place, which is still one of my favorite shows ever. Ever. Fucking love The Good Place. You are getting some videos about that eventually. I'm just saving it till the inspiration strikes me. Obviously, they differ in a lot of ways. Simone is an excited woman who cares about the people around her, and while she might be one of the more blunt members of the cast, she still always does it with good intentions, which sounds very different from a specific malicious bunny. But there's one example in particular that happens in the 4th season of The Good Place where Simone is placed in such an extreme situation that her behavior ends up being similar to that of Jax. Bit of a spoiler warning for a show that ended literally 6 years ago and has been on Netflix most of that time. Go watch it. It's good. Why are you here? And that sounded rude, I'm sorry. I'm happy that you're here. I just don't want to have to explain an entire 4 seasons of a show about philosophy to you in this video where I'm trying to talk about silly animated characters and their philosophy on the world. So spoiler warning, out of the way. Basically, in the fourth season, when Simone reaches the afterlife, she has convinced herself that none of what she's experiencing is real, and that this is just the last of her dying neurons firing, making up a fake scenario for her before she dies. Which, to be fair, she's literally a brain scientist, so it makes sense why she's viewing the afterlife like that. And bring it back to Femboy Rabbit Man.
What does that mean? What's that supposed to mean?
This is a clear difference between them because for all of his dismissiveness, Jax doesn't think that the circus is happening inside of his head like Simone. He acknowledges that things are happening outside of his psyche and actually makes fun of Pomni for having a similar reaction to Simone in the first episode when she thinks that she's in a dream.
If this was real, which it isn't, because it's a dream.
She still thinks this is a dream.
Simone's more self-centered philosophy aligns more with solipsism, which I definitely knew and didn't learn from watching The Good Place. Chidi eventually sits down with her and confronts her directly about her selfish philosophy being juvenile.
I only think that because it's true and I'm right.
No offense, but solipsism as a philosophy is pretty juvenile, and it's also impossible to refute. However,
Dude.
what? I mean, if none of this is real, then it really shouldn't matter, right? In fact,
Dude.
what? It's not real. None of this matters. Leave that on your nose for the rest of time.
Fine. Point sort of taken.
You know, in the larger sense, if you go around acting like no one else matters, then you end up doing things like knocking over cakes and pushing people into pools and just generally acting like a jerk. Why not treat them better, just in case they're real? I mean, what do you have to lose by treating people with kindness and respect?
Like, doesn't that all sound a little bit familiar? But unfortunately, Chidi does not exist in the digital circus. Actually, could you imagine? God. That man had an existential crisis for telling his friends that he thought his boots were cool when he didn't actually think that they were cool. If he booted into a digital world with no clear end in sight and a body he didn't choose and a moral system that arguably might not matter anymore, I'm pretty sure he would abstract before people could even ship him with another character, which would have to be really fast. I've seen you guys. I haven't dove into the depths, but I've seen it. I can't judge. I remember how I used to be. But now I'm sophisticated. Also, now I'm trying to imagine what Chidi would look like if he was booted into the circus. If somebody has some inspiration and they want to draw that, please tag me because I would love to see it. Fun little prompt for you if you want. The reason why this conversation works for Simone, and we all know it would not work for Jax, is because yes, they're both using selfish philosophies as a coping mechanism, but A, Simone is coping with the fact that she's an approximation of heaven, so she has a lot less discomfort to be disassociating from. And B, while they're both using the logic of their philosophies to hide their emotions about their current state, Simone is a woman of science. She's a lot more likely to listen whenever evidence is presented. Jax, on the other hand, is using his nihilistic philosophy to bandage so much grief and stress and pain that at any time somebody questions his philosophy, he is more likely to lash out than to listen to reason. He isn't looking for answers. He isn't looking for solutions. He's looking for a way to cope, a way to escape and minimize all the overwhelming emotions he's feeling.
You know none of this is real, right?
If none of it's real, then none of it matters. If none of it matters, then he doesn't have to feel bad for people getting hurt at his hands or otherwise. And as the story progresses, he has more and more he has to deny, and he does it with his dilated pupils and a big-ass smile. The problem is, even though it seems like it works, it's a temporary solution. Pushing everyone away in an effort to not have to mourn anyone else means that when he needs support, he faces everything alone.
God, you look stupid.
It kind of reminds me of a person who might choose substances over the people in their life in an effort to self-medicate and soothe, but end up pushing away the actual support system in their life until the addiction is their only lifeline. And they'll do anything to keep their hands on it.
There's nothing more to me. So please, just stop looking.
Ragatha, on the other end, is more utilitarian ethics. Let's be real. If Ragatha was presented with the trolley problem, she would throw herself on the tracks. Whether or not it helped anything, she just would. The reason I wanted to discuss these two in the same video is because they're both obviously opposites in a lot of ways. Ragatha is the selfless to Jax selfish, but both on such extremes that neither are healthy. I would say that Ragatha is aligned closest to the fundamentals of utilitarianism, aka the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Okay, bitch? The problem with the way that Ragatha frames this philosophy, however, is that she always seems to place herself in the category of the few. She is self-sacrificial to the point of near absurdity, but similar to Jax, her extreme behavior makes it more apparent what her motivations actually are underneath the guise of the logical philosophy. Ragatha obviously likes to be the peacemaker. From what we know of her past, she comes from a relatively privileged background and grew up in a most likely dysfunctional family, and she constantly felt the need to appease.
I was born into a fairly wealthy family. We had a large property with horses and chickens, and my mother, my mother was a lot. I'm sure she doesn't miss me. I certainly don't miss the yelling, and the braiding, and guilt-tripping, and the... Yeah, just kind of a farm girl. Nothing too out of the ordinary.
She desperately wants everyone to be happy, because that's the only way that she can feel calm and safe. Unfortunately means that she does not feel much of either of those things throughout this whole series. I'm trying to think of a character to compare Ragatha to, like in The Good Place, but honestly, the only example that comes to mind, well, the first examples are like the people in the Heaven Committee, where they're like super bureaucratic and not actually helpful in finding answers.
The time has come to take decisive action.
We're going to form an elite investigative team to get to the bottom of this, and we are fast-tracking the process. It will take no more than 400 years.
Sorry?
But I feel like even Ragatha would at least try to push back at the system if it meant ensuring the greater good would be done. Maybe a little bit closer is fake Eleanor in season 1, which she's literally there to be holier than thou to drive original Eleanor insane. For those of you who don't know, basically the premise of the first season of The Good Place is that Eleanor was placed in heaven, but it was a mistake, and it was actually somebody who died with the same name at the same time as her, and like it was switched, and she knows she's not supposed to be there. So then they eventually find the actual Eleanor, and, you know, she's fucking perfect. Why am I explaining this to you? I already gave you a spoiler warning. But then, at the end of the season, when the twist is revealed that actually The Good Place is not The Good Place, fake Eleanor is revealed to be literally a fucking demon that's just acting that holier than thou in order to piss Eleanor off, and it fucking works. Maybe that's why people hate Ragatha. People who are on the back foot and assuming she's being fake would probably behave closer to the real Eleanor in response to her selfless nature. We follow more of the philosophy of psychological egoism, which I feel like a lot of people do to a certain extent, which is basically the philosophy that even when people do good things, it's just secretly for selfish reasons. And while I do think that there is some merit to that, I think that everything that is selfless has a little bit of selfishness in it, and honestly, maybe even vice versa. I have a video about that too if you want to watch that. That one I did a while ago. Sorry, I'm gonna keep plugging. As long as I keep chugging, I'm gonna keep plugging, okay? You're still here. So obviously it's not that big of a turnoff for you. But if you think that everybody is always out in it for themselves, they only want to do nice things so that you're in their debt, of course, you're gonna be off-put by somebody who is as selfless as Ragatha. Like, I get that not every character is gonna be your favorite, even if they are nice. But in my opinion, anybody who hates Ragatha and loves Jax, that is a red fucking flag to me. New first date question unlocked. Speedrun having your own date walk away from the first date. Someone's gonna be into it, though. I don't know if it's somebody that you're gonna want to take on a second date, but someone will be. Let me know how that goes. Anyway, I have a script. Probably the closest example of Ragatha to a character in The Good Place would probably be Tahani from the main cast. Both came from privilege, although Tahani's level of privilege is fucking insane. Both had parents with incredibly high standards, which led them to pursue acts of selflessness in order to prove themselves worthy to said parents. Funnily enough, Tahani also drives Eleanor crazy, but they learn to bond and come close together when Tahani eventually allows herself to be vulnerable and honest about how so much of her actions were actually inspired by the desire to be seen and admired.
I didn't care about helping the people I raised the money for. I just wanted to prove my parents wrong and stick it to my sister, get fame and attention. My only real goal was to snog Ryan Gosling at the Met Ball, which I did.
Obviously, Ragatha's a little different. Sure, Ragatha can occasionally accidentally be condescending.
Look, Pomni, we're already friends with the princess.
I'm not a child. You don't have to hype me up.
But normally that happens when she's genuinely trying to make the others feel better, but is either trying too hard or just isn't equipped to handle the situation. Whereas Tahani, I love her. She can be condescending on purpose. She knows how to weaponize condescension.
Can I just say, I love your house. It's just so tiny and cute. It's like a little child's plaything, like for a family of mice or for a very fancy little dog. I love it. It's just so sweet and teensy, just like you. Boop.
Oh! You booped me.
It never seems to me that Ragatha behaves the way she behaves in order to receive praise like Tahani does. It seems more like chronic people pleaser that's being raised with the fear that she isn't worthy of being happy until everyone else around her is happy, right? Child of immature parents, common side effects for people with CPTSD, which is actually also similar to disassociation and derealization, which we see in the other extreme character that I'm comparing her to in this video. Hot take about Amazing Digital Circus, they're all traumatized. Who would have fucking guessed? I don't know if I'd claim that Ragatha is as immature as Jax, but it is interesting to see them as opposites on the same scale of extreme behavior stemming from a common but relatively juvenile response to trauma. Utilitarianism is honestly a rather basic philosophy that's been criticized and expanded upon a lot. In fact, there's a whole episode on The Good Place about that.
That's what's so great about the trolley problem is that there is no right answer.
Here, let's try this.
Oh, God!
I made the trolley problem real so we could see how the ethics would actually play out. Make a choice.
The thing is, I mean, ethically speaking...
No time, dude! Make a decision!
Well, it's tricky! I mean, on the one hand, if you ascribe to a purely utilitarian worldview...
Kind of.
So, what did we learn?
But similarly with Jax, it feels more like Ragatha hides behind this philosophy as a shield to hold onto. It justifies her people-pleasing nature, even though we have learned it's not always completely selfless.
Yo, Jax. I, hate you, but I don't want you to hate me. Is that weird?
Similar to Tahani giving millions in charity for the selfish reason of trying to appease her parents, if the outcome is a net positive for people, how much do the selfish reasons actually matter? That, I think, is the philosophy Ragatha clings to desperately. She doesn't view herself as a good person, so she tries to fill that void by doing good things for others.
I don't even know what I want. I just want everyone to be happy.
It gives her purpose and a distraction, but we see how fragile this philosophy is the second she has to make a choice where nobody is the winner. In episode 6, when she teams up with Kinger to keep him away from Jax, but then has to turn Pomni away to do so, we see how much it gets to her. She didn't do the wrong thing, she was just trying to protect the person she thought would be the most vulnerable, but it led to Pomni teaming up with Jax, which she knew wouldn't end well. She was fucking right. Damn. And this affects her deeply, and we see that in her conversation with Kinger.
I think I might have failed Pomni. I tried too hard to get on their good side, and then I just end up pushing them away. And then they end up hating me.
Hey, this is me editing the video later, and it has occurred to me since recording this video that possibly one of the reasons why this affects her so deeply is because the choice for her to team up with Kinger was actually not a selfless one, it was a selfish one because she specifically didn't want to be teamed up with Jax, and I would argue that even if her motivations for that choice were selfish, they're still valid, but that could actually explain why it broke her so much. I think there's room for it to both have been a selfless and selfish action, but in her mind it had to be purely selfless in order for it to be justified, and that could be one of the reasons why it broke her, especially because it did end up with conflict. Chronic people pleaser, doing anything that equals conflict equals bad.
Her utilitarian choice-making was a way to prove to herself that she is a good person, but she's never good enough to actually convince herself. In the end, even though it's a much less destructive philosophy than Jax's, it's still just as flimsy because it's another coping mechanism. Jax pushes people away, Ragatha gives all she has, and in the end, both are left empty-handed.
I don't want people to hate me.
Do you hate yourself?
I kind of cooked with that one. I cooked with that line. Anyway, that was kind of depressing. Did you know that Kinger might be God? I was going to try to do all of the characters in Amazing Digital Circus, starting with Jax and Ragatha, because they are the ones that inspired this idea in my head in the first place, but, wow, I was looking at my script, and I think I'm going to have to do a separate video if I want to explore the rest of them. Let me know what you think the other characters' philosophies would be, or if you completely disagree with my takes, roast me down below, I guess. While you're down there, I'd love it if you could like and subscribe, because, come on. Nothing matters anyway, right? So pressing a button and making a number on a screen go up isn't too much to ask for. Or is it? Oh, if that's too much to ask for, I totally get it. Wouldn't want you to like sprain your wrist or anything from all that effort of clicking a button. Anyway, I think I hear a man made of teeth or something calling me for my next adventure. See you later! Ooh, also, look, I did butterflies in my hair for like the butterfly that Kinger made. I did this, I don't really know why, just felt right. I added this teeth ring that I have. It's definitely more vampy than like Kane, but still. The whole Kane and Abel thing is still rattling in my mind. I don't know what it is yet. Okay, can you tell that I don't want to turn the camera off? I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave you. Okay, I have a rule that once I start swallowing the camera, I need to end. Camera? Once I start swallowing the microphone, I need to end it. If I start swallowing the camera, I'm gonna have bigger problems. Quite literally. Okay, bye. What if one of these videos I ended it by throwing the teacup on the ground? Wait, that's punk rock. Okay, girl, stop.